She was left to die by the river, but one broken cowboy saw something worth saving in her last breath.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The dust swirled across the barren plains as Elijah Cade pulled his horse to a stop. Something caught his eye near the riverbank, something that didn't belong among the rocks and sagebrush. His weathered hands tightened on the reins as he squinted against the harsh afternoon sun. A woman lay crumpled beside the water, her dress torn and stained with dried blood. Her dark hair spread across the ground like spilled ink, and for a terrible moment, Elijah thought she was dead. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the ground hard as he rushed toward her. Kneeling beside her still form, he pressed 2 fingers against her throat. A pulse fluttered beneath his touch, weak but present. "Hey now," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. "You're still with us." Her eyelids flickered but didn't open. Bruises marked her face, and a deep gash ran along her temple. Someone had hurt this woman badly and left her here to die. Elijah had spent the last 3 years avoiding people, avoiding connection, avoiding anything that might remind him of what he'd lost. But he couldn't ride away from this. He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she felt in his arms, and carried her toward his horse. "Do you want Elijah to take her to the nearest town for medical help, or bring her to his isolated cabin in the mountains? If you choose the town, the journey will be longer and more dangerous, but she'll have access to a doctor. If you choose the cabin, she'll have shelter immediately, but her care will rest entirely in Elijah's hands." The choice seemed to make itself. Town was 2 days' ride, and she might not survive the journey. His cabin was only a few hours away, and he had supplies there, bandages and herbs his late wife had taught him to use. He secured her against his chest and urged his horse forward. She woke screaming. Elijah nearly dropped the bowl of water he was carrying as the woman thrashed in his bed, her eyes wild with terror. She scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the wall, and she looked around frantically, searching for escape. "Easy," Elijah said, setting down the bowl and raising his hands. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you." Her chest heaved as she stared at him. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My name's Elijah Cade. Found you by the river yesterday, half dead. You're in my cabin, up in the hills." She touched her bandaged forehead, wincing. "You brought me here. Couldn't very well leave you there." Something shifted in her expression, confusion mixing with disbelief. "Why not? Everyone else did." The words hit him harder than they should have. He recognized that emptiness in her voice, the sound of someone who had stopped expecting kindness. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, and he watched her decide whether to trust him. "Clara," she finally said. "Clara Donovan. Well, Clara Donovan, you're welcome to stay here until you're healed. Then you can go wherever you please, but right now you need rest and food." She studied him for a long moment. "You don't know me. You don't know what kind of trouble might follow me here. I've had enough trouble in my life that a little more won't make much difference." A ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed her face. "You might regret saying that." Over the following days, Clara grew stronger. Elijah learned to read the subtle changes in her expression, the way she tensed at sudden noises, the way she sometimes stared out the window as if expecting demons to materialize from the trees. She didn't talk about what had happened to her, and he didn't ask. Some wounds needed time before they could be spoken aloud. Instead, they fell into a quiet routine. He would tend to his horses and chop wood, while she gradually took over small tasks around the cabin, insisting that she earn her keep despite his protests. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara found him sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. "You lost someone," she said softly, settling beside him. It wasn't a question. "My wife," he answered after a long pause, "and my daughter. Fever took them both 3 winters ago." Clara was silent for a moment. Is that why you live out here alone? Seemed easier than watching the world go on without them. She nodded slowly. I understand running from pain, but I'm starting to think it follows you no matter how far you go. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw not just a woman he'd saved, but someone who understood loss in a way few people could. What happened to you, Clara? Do you want Clara to reveal that she was fleeing from an arranged marriage to a cruel man, or that she witnessed something dangerous and powerful men want her silenced? Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. My father owed money to a man named Marcus Brennan. When he couldn't pay, Brennan decided he'd take me instead. I was supposed to be delivered to him like livestock. Elijah's jaw tightened. The men who hurt you, Brennan's men, they were transporting me when I managed to escape, jumped from the wagon while it crossed the river. They must have assumed I drowned. She touched her forehead again, hit my head on the rocks going down. And this Brennan, he'll come looking for you. Eventually, he's not the kind of man who gives up what he considers his property. Elijah felt something stir in his chest, something that had been dormant for years. It wasn't just protectiveness, though that was part of it. It was purpose. For the first time since burying his family, he had a reason to care about tomorrow, and will be ready for him. Clara's eyes glistened. You'd do that? Risk yourself for someone you barely know. I know enough. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that needed no words. They were both broken people, both survivors of different kinds of devastation, and somehow, in finding each other, they'd found something worth protecting. The weeks passed, and autumn crept into the mountains, painting the trees in brilliant reds and golds. Clara's wounds healed, but she showed no signs of wanting to leave, and Elijah found he didn't want her to. They worked side by side, preparing the cabin for winter. He taught her to ride properly, and she taught him to laugh again. At night they sat by the fire, sharing stories of their pasts, gradually piecing together the people they used to be. One afternoon, while gathering herbs near the stream, Clara slipped on a wet rock. Elijah caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her waist. She looked up at him, her face inches from his, and time seemed to stop. Elijah, she whispered. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted it more than he'd wanted anything in years. But fear held him back. Fear of betraying his wife's memory. Fear of letting someone into his heart only to lose them again. Do you want Elijah to pull away and apologize, or give in to the moment and kiss her? He released her gently and stepped back. We should get inside. Storm's coming. Hurt flickered across Clara's face before she masked it. Of course. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the easy warmth between them replaced by something strained and awkward. That night, Elijah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In the main room, he could hear Clara tossing restlessly on the bedroll he'd set up for himself while insisting she take the bed. He thought about H, his wife, about the love they'd shared. She had been his whole world, and when she died, he'd wanted to die too. But he hadn't. He'd survived one empty day after another, until survival had become its own kind of punishment. Now here was Clara, brave and wounded and beautiful, offering him something he'd never expected to find again, and he was too afraid to reach for it. Morning brought a knock at the door. Elijah grabbed his rifle and motioned for Clara to stay hidden. He opened the door to find an old friend, Thomas Greyfeather, a tracker who lived on the land to the east. Riders coming, Thomas said without preamble, 8 of them. Asking about a woman with dark hair, Elijah's blood ran cold. How far? Half a day, maybe less. They've got a man with them who looks like he's in charge. Mean eyes, fancy clothes. Brennan. It had to be. Thank you, Thomas. The older man nodded. You helped me when my son was sick. I don't forget. He glanced past Elijah into the cabin. Whatever fight you're facing, you don't have to face it alone. After Thomas left, Clara emerged from the back room, her face pale. You should let me go. Lead them away from here. I won't be responsible for your death. I already told you, I'm not leaving you. Why? She demanded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why do you care so much about what happens to me? Elijah crossed the room and took her hands in his. Because you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to keep living. Clara stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. Elijah, I've been so afraid of losing again that I forgot how to hold on. But I don't want to hide from life anymore. I don't want to hide from you. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Whatever comes through that door, we face it together. And when it's over, if we're still standing, I want to end whatever time I have left making you happy. What if we don't survive? Then at least I'll die knowing I finally had the courage to love again. This time, when he leaned down, he didn't stop himself. His lips met hers in a kiss that was tender and fierce all at once, full of promise and hope and healing. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was smiling through her tears. I think I started falling for you the moment I opened my eyes and saw you sitting by my bed, looking at me like I was worth saving. You were, he said. You are. Do you want them to stand and fight against Brennan's men or attempt to escape deeper into the mountains? They prepared for battle. Elijah knew these mountains like he knew his own hands. Every ridge, every hidden valley, every place where a man could set an ambush. He and Clara spent the remaining hours fortifying the cabin and planning their defense. When Brennan's riders finally appeared on the horizon, they were ready. The fight was brutal and terrifying. Gunfire echoed off the hills as Elijah picked off men from his protected position while Clara loaded weapons and watched his back. Thomas Gray Feather appeared with 3 of his kinsmen, evening the odds in ways Brennan hadn't anticipated. In the end, it was Clara herself who faced down Marcus Brennan. He found her in the barn, cornered, or so he thought. Did you really believe you could escape me? He sneered, advancing toward her. Clara's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. I'm not the same frightened girl your men dragged from her home. No? He laughed. What are you now? Someone worth fighting for. The shot came from behind Brennan, Elijah's rifle true as ever. The cruel man fell, and Clara finally truly felt free. Spring came to the mountains like a benediction. The snow melted, wildflowers bloomed, and the scars of that violent autumn began to fade. Clara stood on the porch, watching Elijah approach from the barn. He walked differently now, she'd noticed, lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. What are you thinking about? He asked, climbing the steps to join her. I'm thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago I was drowning in that river, certain I was going to die. And now, she gestured at the beautiful landscape around them, at the man beside her. Now I have everything I never dared to dream of. Elijah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. You know what my wife told me near the end? She said, don't you dare stop living, Elijah Cade. Promise me you'll find happiness again. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was, and she would have loved you. He tilted Clara's chin up to look into her eyes. I spent 3 years breaking that promise. Then you came into my life, and suddenly keeping it didn't seem so impossible anymore. Clara reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that time and sorrow had carved there. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to marry you, Clara Donovan. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. I want every morning to start with your smile and every evening to end with you in my arms. Tears streamed down her face, but she was laughing. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, sealing their promise as the mountain wind sang around them. They were married in the meadow below the cabin, with Thomas Gray Feather and his family as witnesses. Clara wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple but beautiful, with wildflowers woven into her hair. As they spoke their vows, Elijah thought about all the paths that had led them to this moment. The tragedy that had brought Clara to that riverbank. The grief that had driven him to isolation. The courage it had taken for both of them to trust again. She wasn't meant to survive that day by the river, but one cowboy had refused to leave her behind, and in saving her, he had saved himself. Now, as they turned to face their future together, they both knew that the greatest adventures were just beginning. The end and the beginning.